Today we're going to talk about 3 ways to execute a subject to deal. Coming up. Hey everybody, it's Jamel Gibbs with the REI Education Academy, helping you close deals consistently in your real estate investing business. Now today we're going to talk about 3 different ways that you can execute a subject to deal. Now a couple of months ago I did a video on the entire subject to process. I explained the entire thing, and I'm going to link that video up at the top so that you can see what a subject to deal is. Now you might hear some noise in the background. We're actually doing some remodeling on my personal house. I'm actually turning my garage into an in-home gym. I'm also rebuilding my deck in the back. We're actually building a multi-layer deck and knocking down the original deck. We're doing a roof, we're painting the outside, putting some money into my house. I bought this house back in 2014 at a great price. I bought it just like an investor would. When I purchased this home, I had $100,000 in equity in it because the couple that sold the property to us, they were getting a divorce. All right, so just like an investor, I'm always looking at the deal itself. So this house was only about 8 years old when we bought it. We're the second owners of this house, where it's about 3,500 square feet. And we decided that we're gonna start remodeling this property at this point. But on with the video. What are some of the ways that you can execute a subject to deal? Well, the first way you can do it is by wholesaling the subject to deal. Now, just like with wholesaling a regular deal, all you're doing is assigning your rights in the contract over to your retail buyer or even your investor buyer based off of who's going to purchase the property from you. Now, how would that actually work? Well, typically when it comes to a subject to deal, you have to remember all you're doing is taking over the existing loan that's on the property. So for example, I got a deal that we're working on right now. The payments are about $850 a month. All right. I took over the $850 a month at the same interest rate. There's a loan on it for $127,000. The house is worth about $250. It needs some work, but all I did was take over the $850 per month payments for the life of the loan. So I believe there's another 20 years left on that loan. We would just have to pay off the loan for another 20 years. I'm gonna get to that in just a second, because there's multiple things that you can do in order to execute this type of deal. So in this case, what we're doing is I asked for $190 for the property, or if an investor were to come in, I asked for $20,000 as a down payment. And then all I'm gonna do is allow the other investor to take over the payments on the property. So essentially, what's gonna happen is the investor is gonna pay $147 for the property. I'm gonna walk with the $20,000 in my pocket. The investor doesn't need to go out and get any hard money. They don't need to come up with $147,000. They need to just come up with $20,000 plus the amount that they're gonna use to rehab the property. And at the end of the day, they'll make the $850 payments per month. Ultimately, they're probably gonna end up renting that property to someone else. So that's the first way. You will wholesale the subject to deal. And the down payment that goes on the property is gonna be your wholesale fee. And all you're gonna do is assign your rights over to the end buyer. It could be the retail buyer or an investor. So that's wholesaling subject to deals in a nutshell. The second way to close a subject to deal is by taking over the mortgage, just like you would during a normal subject to process, but then you would sell it on a lease with an option to purchase, or rent to own, as they call it. I prefer lease with an option to purchase, primarily because it's a safer way to market the property. You can essentially take over the mortgage. Again, using that other property as an example, I would take over the $850 payments at $127,000 owed at the same exact interest rate. And then I would turn around, find out what the rent comps are in the area, which, you know, for that particular property is right around $1,300 to $1,400. But knowing that I can lease purchase this property, I can ask for more money. So I can turn around and I can do a lease with an option to buy with 5 or 10% down or more. I generally don't ask for a specific amount as far as a down payment. I want to find out how much the buyer has to put down. Generally, if someone doesn't have $15,000 to $20,000, I probably won't do the deal with them. I'll look for someone else who has more money down. But again, this house is $250,000. I'm looking for at least $20,000 down on this property. And I would then turn around, make them responsible for repairing the entire property. I won't put a dime of my own money into the property. Then I'll turn around and do a rent to own with them at $1,500 per month. So that's tip number 2. You know, the first way you can wholesale it. The second way, you can take over the payments and then sell it on a lease with an option to purchase. Tip number 3, when it comes to subject to investing. We understand that wholesaling is simply assigning the contract, and we understand that the down payment from the wholesale type of deal on a subject to is gonna be your wholesale profit. We also understand that we can keep the property and take over the payments and do a lease with an option to purchase. And that's gonna leave us with money up front when we collect the down payment. That's gonna leave us with a profit every single month. And that's also gonna give us profit on the back end when we sell, because the difference between what you actually sell the property for and what's owed on the property is gonna be all pocket money at the end of the day. So that's 2 different ways. Then you have the third way. You can simply take over the mortgage on the property, put some money into the property, and then rent the property out. Keep it long term. If there's a 20-year mortgage on the property or a 25-year mortgage on the property left, then you're simply gonna let that mortgage continue to ride out for 20 to 25 years or until you decide to sell that property. Doing it this way, it's gonna make you more of a landlord, but again, you get to make that monthly cash flow. You're probably not gonna get as much in rent as you would on a lease purchase because it's technically a real rental and there isn't any ownership for the buyer on the other end. So you're probably gonna get normal rent rates. So you wanna make sure that the mortgage can be covered by the rents in the area. And this will ultimately allow you to keep this property in your portfolio long term. So again, just to recap the 3, you have wholesaling subject to deals, which will ultimately allow you to accept a down payment as your wholesale profit and then assign your rights in your contract to your end buyer. You also have lease optioning the property, which will allow you to take over the mortgage and then sell it on a rent to own as is. So it doesn't matter what the property condition is, if it's in great shape or if it needs work, the tenant will be responsible. We typically make the tenant responsible for repairing the property. We accept the down payment from them, and then we also collect money every single month and money on the back end. So you essentially get paid 3 different times on one deal. And then you can also just simply take over the payments on the property and keep the property as a rental long term. Doing it this way, although you're not borrowing money to purchase the property, you may have to borrow some money to fix the property up. You can partner with somebody else to get the money up if you don't have the capital yourself, but ultimately you'll be able to keep this property long term. So that's 3 different ways that you can execute a subject to deal. Be sure to implement these strategies, get out there, mix it up a little bit. You know, maybe you will wholesale some, maybe you want to keep some long term, maybe you want to sell some on a lease purchase. My favorite one, to be honest with you, is the second one. I like to take over properties subject to or by using some other creative method. And then what I'll typically do is I'll rent the property, I'll accept the down payment, which is money up front. Then I'll take the money every single month, which is cash flow for me, and money on the back end, which provides me with a huge spread. So that way I'm getting the best of all worlds. I'm getting a wholesale-like check up front. Even though it's not a wholesale check, it's equivalent to a wholesale check. I'm collecting cash flow every single month on these properties. And then I get a rehab type of check. And even though it's not a rehab again, I'm getting something that's equivalent to a rehab check on the back end. So I really get some money up front, money every month, money on the back end. My absolute favorite way of investing these days outside of wholesaling houses. Hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like it, share it with others, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, in the comment section below, and I'll talk to you on the next one.